Karen Livingstone is here to talk to us about that. Karen is Director of Partnerships and Industry Engagement for the Eastern Academic Health Science Network. There are 15 AHSNs, and Eastern is one of the 15. She's also National Director for SBRI Healthcare. Karen supports the network to develop its role in economic development and wealth creation. Karen leads the Small Business Research Initiative, the SBRI, for NHS England. Before that, Karen was a Campaigns and Communications Director for several national trade unions and the Labour Party and voluntary sector organisations. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Karen.
Thank you very much, and I'm conscious that I'm very much the last speaker, so I'll try and keep it focused and hopefully make it as relevant as possible in terms of the industry voice. I am going to start, however, with the dreaded chart that Howard has had. His version actually was inverse the other way up, but in essence, because people haven't heard, and in fairness, people in the NHS haven't heard about academic health science networks. So I just wanted to give you a feel for where do they fit in the landscape. So just very quickly, as Howard outlined, the blue bit is the commissioning pathway, and broadly speaking, they've got the bulk of the money. So that's the sort of route in terms of commissioning care, and obviously they can commission care from a variety of trusts, the commissioning support units that Howard mentioned, but also from the third and independent sectors. There is some commissioning that comes through specialist commissioning, so the National Commissioning Board does specialist commissioning as well, and of course it commissions primary care. So there is a differentiation in terms of where that commissioning route is. But broadly speaking, it's the blue bit, and they commission from the yellow bit. And then the public health community and the local government community are sort of in the green place in terms of health and wellbeing boards and where they fit in, and obviously clinical commissioning groups sit on health and wellbeing boards and bring a coherence with the health and wellbeing board to a local community, and their strategy is set for that geography, and therefore you have a sort of a specialist clinical area but also a geographical leadership and leadership of place. The regulatory bodies, I think, just sort of earmarked down there in the green. And then the purpley sort of maroon entities, and clearly the HSN is inversely proportionate to its actual budget, but just to give you some illustration of where we sit. We sit, broadly speaking, at a regional tier, and our significance is about bringing influence and about bringing coordination of different aspects of care, either because there's specific clinical changes or specific clinical focus, or the role in terms of the Academic Health Science Network is around how do we build the evidence for the future, how do we create pathways for the future, and how do we actually disseminate and bring about innovation and new practice. So there's those sort of purpley maroon entities have got, as I say, that sort of regional coordination of different aspects, but the AHSNs are tasked significantly with the rollout and dissemination of new practice and innovation based, of course, on evidence. So, as we said, there's 15 academic health science networks across the region, across England, and their broad remit is set out for you there. So, they're charged with driving service improvement and setting the agenda for the future in terms of how service should be delivered. They're also charged with creating the evidence or understanding the evidence that's actually going to change service for the future. So I'm conscious I'd rather stand in the front than behind the lectern, and translating what the evidence says into how new service models should be used. But significantly, they've also got a responsibility, and this is entirely new for the NHS, for wealth creation. And if I'm honest, I think within NHS structures, it's still quite an anomaly for us to actually understand what is it that we can do that's about wealth creation, what is it that we can do that's about supporting opportunities in industry to actually build our own regional economy. And as said in my introduction, I was on the board of EDA, the Regional Development Agency, for 9 years, and the board of Business Link East. So a background in that supporting business development, and yet the NHS has never had a role in that activity before. We've done it accidentally, but we've never been charged with that responsibility, and we now have the responsibility to do that. In the Eastern region, the Eastern Academic Health Science Network is based on 4 regional centres, or nodes as we've called them, which is reflective of the clinical communities that there are around Cambridge, the Hertfordshire Stevenage corridor, and then also Norwich and then Essex. But it's crucially also reflective of where our industry is based. So we know that the bioscience space cluster around Cambridge is a hugely powerful one, the largest one outside America. But then we also know that in the Norfolk patch, the food tech and their understanding of food science and nutrition science is world leading similarly. So those 2 industry conurbations and those 2 industry clusters match our clinical communities. And then our pharma corridor around Stevenage and the M11 is equally matched up with our health communities around the Hertfordshire area. And then finally, over in Essex, we've got a strength in terms of the medtech and biotech communities, and that is built into our Colchester base. Our plan at the moment across the Eastern Academic Health Science Network for our industry engagement is around building the pipeline, building the case for commercialisation for ideas from NHS staff, and then also trying to establish an enduring dialogue. You'll perhaps forgive us for what is a fairly embryonic plan at the moment. We're only licensed mid-May, so we are still very much determining what it is that we should and can do to bring some opportunity to that wealth creation activity. We've planned at the moment that we need to work very extensively with our 2 sort of governance structures, which we're trying to establish an industry board that would bring, I think, some challenge and some opportunity from industry voice to the NHS. And I'm very keen that we get some good colleagues who can come in and say how challenging it is to work with the NHS. So I hear it on a constant basis, how difficult we are as a customer. But also help us co-create and craft some better solutions to how the NHS is actually functioning in terms of its interaction with industry. But also we want a very strong platform with our local enterprise partnerships. And we've started that dialogue, but again, as I say, we're very embryonic in our establishment, and we're starting to build an understanding of what it is that we can do with the local enterprise partnerships to maximise the opportunity of the life science sector for those local economies, but also from our point of view deliver some ambition around the healthcare sector. The plan in outline is to have sort of 3 main areas of activity in our industry liaison. So we know we need to do something around translating, if you like, matchmaking industry with healthcare partners. So we know there's a role around signposting and supporting that communication dialogue across industry and the NHS. It will be quite a culture challenge for many of our NHS colleagues. They're very familiar with talking to colleagues across the NHS. They're less familiar talking to industry colleagues about co-creating and crafting solutions. So part of our role is about supporting the change in that culture and enabling those doors to open better, but also enable people to know which doors to go through. We've also got an important role to commercialise the products and support the commercialisation of products that our NHS staff come up with. Every day NHS staff are seeing challenges in the front line and actually coming up with solutions to those challenges. Sometimes their local hospital trust might take that forward and enable them to deliver the service in that trust, but often we don't see the opportunity of growing those ideas into commercial offers that the UK PLC could benefit from. So we've got a role to try and support that. And then thirdly, in the east of England, we've been asked to lead, and I run the Small Business Research Initiative on behalf of NHS England. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but a big part of that is about what is it that we do and can do to support the opportunities for SMEs particularly. And we know how challenging it is in terms of the lead times for healthcare, but also the difficulties if you don't have a huge marketing division and so on. So there's quite a lot that I think the Academic Health Science Network can do to try and develop an offer to the SMEs. So if I come on to the Small Business Research Initiative, it's really by way of an illustration. So this is an example of, so what does the Academic Health Science Network might actually deliver? This is a programme that has been running since 2009, but it's exactly the sort of programme that the AHSNs will be running in the future. And if you're not familiar with SBRI, it's a pan-government initiative, so you can find SBRI competitions in the MOD, also across local government. And what it is a way of government specifying a problem that it has and then inviting industry to come in and provide the solution. And in the course of that invite, the government pays for that development. So in the NHS, the Innovation Health and Wealth Report committed to double the investment in SBRI, and we went from what was a 5 million budget to a 10 million budget. I have to say, since the Chancellor's budget in March of this year, there's now 32 million being spent in 2013 on the Small Business Research Initiative, and there will be 64 million next year. So I'm hoping that that has got some interest, and I'm hoping that there will be some fantastic opportunities for companies in the east of England and wider to come up with some solutions. So if you're not familiar with it, the way SBRI works, as I said, is we have to, so in the NHS, we have to come up with an identification of our unmet need. In my world, that's probably the hardest thing we have to do. We have to actually understand what our challenges are and understand where we've got gaps and unmet need in those challenges. Having identified them, we then put out a call, and it is a competition to industry to come up with solutions for those unmet needs. From your point of view, if you're successful in that process, you'll get 100% funding, so we don't expect match funding. And you also, it's subject to procurement rules, so you're also able to retain the IP. We don't take any cut in terms of the company's IP. And I'll explain why in a minute. So, broadly speaking, as I say, the process is we identify the problem, we put out a call to industry, and we'll do a series of workshops setting out what the challenges are, how we're struggling to develop solutions to those particular challenges, and then we'll pay, after an assessment process, a handful of companies up to £100,000 to take forward the feasibility of their idea. And after 6 months, we'll assess them again, and on the assumption that it's working well, we'll give you what will be up to £750,000 to actually take your product, hopefully, right the way through to market. At the end of the line, we don't commit the NHS to buy your product. However, what we do hope is if we've got the unmet need right at the beginning, then the NHS will really want your product, because if you're producing something that we currently don't have a solution for, or in Howard's terms, we've transformed the care pathway, and some of the products we've commissioned to date, we absolutely have done that, then the NHS will want to see what you've got. So if I just say a little bit about what we've done to date, and this will explain a little bit about why we don't take a cut in the IP. We've run 11 programmes to date. It's represented so far about £12 million worth of public investment, and you'll see that a lot of private investment comes in alongside it. So many of the companies that succeed at SBRI also secure VC or other private investment. And it's over £10 million worth of private investment has come into SBRI companies. You'll see that in terms of competition, we get a lot of applicants. So if you are interested in this programme, by all means catch me, and we'll do some specific sessions later on in the year. But there is competition for this, so you need to make sure that you really understand that your product meets our needs. So just quickly, I've got 3 quick examples of products that have come through the process, and I hope that it will give you a feel for exactly the sorts of things that we're looking for. So Aseptica is a Huntington-based company. They've got a home-based testing kit for people with cystic fibrosis to indicate whether they're going to have an exacerbation. So basically, you'll be aware it's a relatively small community, cystic fibrosis, but they are quite an expensive community from the NHS point of view. And what this kit does is enable sputum testing at home so that patients and families, because often these are young people, know that their child has got an exacerbation 3, 4, 5, even 7 days ahead of it actually being apparent. And so the ability to know that in advance means that the antibiotics regimen can be changed to match the known exacerbation that's going on. On a practical level, from the NHS's point of view, what that we hope will mean, and we've done some economic modelling, is that the loss of the patients will spend a lot less time in hospital because we'll have treated it much quicker and their response should be stronger. What it means at the moment in trial, they're doing trials at Papworth with this product, is families are actually saying to our the company running this trial that they know when their child is well. And the ability to know when their child is well means that they now have much more normal family life. So they go and do things because they know that their child is well. Because these are families that are often sort of very much driven by, oh, is John going to get a problem? And so they don't do things. So it's quite an exciting opportunity in terms of changing the pathway for that particular cohort. That company is now looking at whether it has applicability in COPD as well, which is an infinitely larger community. Dixomed is a London, Edinburgh-based company actually, but they're running their trials in London, King's. It's a nitric oxide wound dressing. They came to us with the technology that they had worked through how to get nitric oxide into a gel, and we then funded them to take it forward, put it into a wound dressing and use it significantly with diabetic patients, but also with chronic wounds. That's a company that's gone from 3 staff to 5, and they're, as I say, doing trials at King's. They've had regulatory approval, and there's significant interest in that product because of the likely speeding up of chronic wound healing as a consequence of the nitric oxide releasing opportunity. And then Icona, who were in our first cohort, so came to us in 2009, an Oxford University spin-out company. They came to us having got the software to produce a handheld 3D imaging camera, and we funded them to take that forward and actually produce the physical camera. And that allows you to do 3D imaging of wounds in primary care settings or home care settings. That product has gone through the full sort of testing process and now is in 12 NHS organisations. It's being used in Southampton with a telemedicine podiatry service, as well as selling internationally. And I know that they also have had interest from Aden's, one of the hospitals in Aden's, who's coming over to see how they're using this system in terms of telehealth offer. So those are 3 examples. There's 57 SBRI companies to date, but it's very likely, given that funding leverage, as I said, from 32 million to 64, that there will be very many more SBRI companies. I'm in the process of working through with the academic health science networks exactly what clinical areas the next round of SBRI competitions will cover. But it's likely that there will be a number of clinical areas, and it's likely that we will have a competition called September, October time. So if you want to log on, take a note of that web address, all the details will get published on that website, but you might like to look out for it in the sort of September time if you think it's something that your company would be interested to work with. And I guess I probably would just underscore that, yes, we do give you financial support, but we also very much support the SBRI companies with access to clinicians and also access to patient groups, so that hopefully, if we picked right at the beginning, what we get is a really successful pathway that transforms care. And I think, I'm just going to check my time, I think I'm about on time, so I will pass over and be happy to join questions. Thank you very much.
Well, when we were putting this seminar together, I don't think we could have hoped for 4 better speakers than that. I mean, what a session that was. And amazingly, given the amount of content, and I think really interesting content, we actually bang on time. We've got plenty of time for questions. And I'll just say thank you to Karen for that talk, because we thought we heard it all. Now we've heard all about the innovation and the possibilities that academia, industry, and the NHS working together. And I think what's particularly interesting, even though it's work in progress, Karen, is that the picture you've painted is really building on what you're already doing with SBRI and seeing the public commitment to increasing the funding and the opportunities, as you say, from VC funding going forward. So there are plenty of opportunities for people to work together. Collaboration, pathways, we've heard lots of buzzwords today.